Well, that was an immediate critic by Professor Nkwocha of the University of Lagos on the government's presentation of the scorecard. Right here in our studios, we have Mr. Adewale Smart Oyeride, who is the Director General of Nigeria's Employers Consultative Association. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I do not know, were you present at the presentation of the scorecard?
No, I wasn't, but I followed conversation.
You followed the conversation. Do you agree with Professor Nkwocha when he says that this has only been at the macro level, benefiting perhaps employers and big companies, but not trickling down to the small people?
Well, I think the reality for us is this, and for me, it's probably the transparency in the context of the presentation. While some areas were labeled green, improving, and instructively, there were areas where the minister mentioned there were structural improvements. And I also remember in many conversations, I think the president also have alluded to the fact that, look, we've experienced some level of stability at the top level, and it's now for those benefits to start trickling down to the shop floor. So absolutely, we've had stability at the structural level, or we're experiencing some stability at the structural level. And you need to have that stability at the structural level before things start trickling down to the shop floor, as I'll call it, to the average. There's no common man again, but to the average Nigerian. As
why is it there's no common man again?
The word common is too common now.
Well, 15.8 trillion, that is how much the minister says we have saved between June 2023 and December 2025. Are these figures that you align with, especially coming from the private sector?
You know, there is, from the reason of the job we do, where data research is what rules your conversation. Then it becomes difficult when the minister, especially coming from his antecedents, he's not the traditional politician that we know. And from my experience and engagement with him, while he was PwC, while he was chairman of the presidential committee, and now we believe strongly that it's not frivolous. And for him, he has quite a lot at stake. So significantly, we believe the context of what he has presented, and the calmness at which he presented it also, I think he is in a position to defend those figures. So there's no reason for us to doubt a figure that has been published in the public place, with opportunities for stakeholders to fact check it.
Has any of these figures, or any of these savings, has it accrued in any way to the private sector, or would you say that the private sector has been left holding the short end of the stick?
Well, at the initial stage, when the president came up, there is about 20 billion intervention fund for the private sector. There's another fund for SMEs, support for SMEs, and support for MSMEs, which for manufacturers especially, which the president magnanimously gave at that point. So the private sector has enjoyed a bit of support within the context of this figure, but there are no grants. There are loans in short-term, single-digit loans. But beyond the loans, beyond the figures, there are also issues that we think are to be addressed, that we are currently escalating to the right authority so that they can deal with those issues, especially for the private sector. Because in the context of this presentation, money was saved, expenditures were made, and there was no specifics. Even when infrastructure, we say infrastructure development has consequences for the private sector, because building infrastructures, the private sector will benefit indirectly from those infrastructures. But there are also inherent issues that I said that we are escalating, that we think the minister needs to deal with quickly, so that they don't frustrate the outcome, the expected outcome of these reforms.
Do you want to expatiate on some of those issues?
Now, currently, and quite unfortunately, we have over 130 bills at the National Assembly, and those bills, many of them have private sector will contribute 0.01% to something. The private sector will contribute 0.5% to something. The private sector will contribute 1% to fund something. Now, if you aggregate the whole of those 0.1%, 0.5%, aggregate all those, they eat back into the profit before tax or profit after tax of those companies. And these figures, this was 0. They are not taxes. They are not the traditional taxes. And we feel those are direct contradictions to the outcome, the expected outcome of the reform tax itself. Basically, one of them is reduce the proliferation of taxes, levies, and fees across the board. Now we are still trying to implement the Tax Act itself. We are in the process of implementing with the issues that are coming up. And now we have over 130 bills still waiting as part maybe the first, second, or third reading at the Senate or the National Assembly. Those are contradictions. Those are inherent issues that can frustrate the outcome of this of the reforms. And we also have agencies, some agencies of government, because of the act that enables them, they also come in with increasing levies, increasing fees, increasing charges, which we also feel is against the overall objective of this administration's plan to stabilize the private sector and also to grow this economy.
You know, you were saying something about not having specific, but I want to be able to break down exactly what it is that the finance minister said yesterday. So he said the federal government received 5.4 trillion. Well, of course, we're talking about that 15.8 trillion that was saved from from the removal of fuel subsidy. So he said the federal government received 5.4 trillion of that amount, while 10.4 trillion was shared between the states and local governments. So let's have that down. And then he said the federal government generated 3.1 trillion in incremental independent revenue, mainly through remittances from government-owned entities. Then he now goes further. Then he now said the federal government's incremental resources over the period, subsidy savings, independent revenue, and incremental borrowing, 20.4 trillion naira. And then he now says the additional borrowing of 11.9 trillion would have been significantly higher. You remember, this government has been criticized for constantly borrowing. So he said the 11.9 trillion would have been higher without the fiscal space that was created by the president's reforms. And then he says they recorded 30.64 trillion in incremental expenditure during that same period. And but he now starts to talk about what it is that we're facing when it comes to repaying our debts. Now he says if we were paying 1 million before, if we were paying 1 million, well, of that amount, he said wage adjustments 9.39 trillion, minimum wage increases and allowances for public servants, while 9.37 trillion was towards external debt servicing. Now he's saying if we were paying $1 million before in interest for our foreign debt, it is still the same 1 million, but instead of 460 naira, it's now 1,415 naira. So the issue is when the minister gives us all of these, and he may be correct because you know we know just that with he knows his figures. Now the issue is when we say there's going to be a reform, I even wrote it down here, a reform scorecard. Maybe you can speak to the reason why this administration feels it necessary to do a reform scorecard, and if the reform scorecard actually translates into a better life for the Nigerian people from the standpoint of a manufacturer.
First, let me speak to the issue of the increasing quantum of amount you are using to pay for debt.
Yes.
And I'm glad that was mentioned because you know it's a double-edged sword also for the private sector. So for businesses that are borrowed, that running on credit, when dollar was 400 and something naira, now they have to face the risk or the jeopardy of paying the same, probably double or triple what they borrowed.
From 460 naira to 1,415 naira.
So it's the same thing for the private sector. So it's the same jeopardy that the private sector faces. And while the government can print money, you can do ways and means. The private sector doesn't have the luxury of overborrowing because it comes back to the business. So I just want to note that. Now the issue of whether the scorecard is necessary. You know, I've been in forums where people ask, we remove subsidy. Then what have we used the fund for subsidy to do?
Because when he says the money was shared, 10.4. He said 10.4 trillion was shared among states and local governments. Of that 15 billion 15.8 is not billion, it's trillion. 15.8 trillion that Mark was talking about. 10.4 was shared among states and local governments. How has that translated into the pockets of Nigerians?
Now the one we should look at, and the area we focus on is, now, subsidy was removed. A large amount was supposedly saved. Now the question then was, okay, where exactly has the money gone? Many view the federal government as the all in all, conscripting this money, using it for his own use. Now he has basically explained, look, this is how we made the money. This is where the money has gone. Now he's now giving citizens the opportunity to say, look, the states have collected this much. I read yesterday that it was for July, the state actually shared the largest chunk of amount, about 3 trillion, if I'm not mistaken, that was shared. The biggest in the context of amount that was shared to all the states. Now it has given all of us the opportunity to, one, fact check what the minister have said. If the states have not received, if they have not received as much as they said they've received, then let the state come out and say we have not received as much. Now, if the states have received as much, it's now left for citizens to start interrogating the state governments, interrogating the local government or authorities to say, look, you have received this much. What exactly have you done with it? If our propensity to borrow is increasing, because the more the propensity to borrow, then the likelihood of your interest also increasing. Now, as for us to interrogate ourselves, is it correct or is it sustainable for us to continue to borrow? And then the expenditure aids that he has given. Now for Nigerians to start interrogating those expenditure aids, now, are these the priorities for us now? And all of us make our recommendation to the government. But the transparency of the presentation, the clarity that it provides, I have the slides, and it gives you something to think through, something to interrogate. And then if you want to make your policy recommendation to government, and you're in a better position to make those policy recommendations.
I want to keep repeating it, Malba. 15.8 trillion was saved in fuel subsidy, and the government says 10.4 trillion of the 15.8 trillion was sent to states and local governments. So the question now becomes, what have the states and local governments done with the 10.4 trillion naira that was given to them from the removal of fuel subsidy, the money saved by the removal of fuel subsidy?
That's a big question.
So do you think that pressure is now on the state governments to show, their own commissioners of finance also have a duty to now also hold their own scorecards and say, oh, this is what we have done?
Absolutely. I think it should trickle down. The commissioners of finance in states, you come out and also say, this is how much we've received, this is how much we have spent. We believe strongly that as private businesses, at the end of the year, you audit your account, you present your scorecard to your shareholders, to gauge what we have done. The Minister of Finance has bailed the cat now, and the state also should follow. And so this is how much we have received. These are the constraints we face, and this is how we have expended this amount. I think we should move progressively towards transparency in government, and which the Minister of Finance has, has set the pace now.
And I think the President has always alluded to that. Every time he has the opportunity to, speak to it, he will always say, but states are getting so much money now. What are they doing with the money? Are they building? They should stop building flyovers where it is not needed and focus on the quality of life of the average Nigerian.
I think we should commend the President for one thing. It takes some level of boldness, and he has demonstrated that to allow your Minister of Finance to come and share this kind of information. I'm not sure we've had it like this before. Allowing the Minister of Finance to walk and come and share what he has done, and come and defend how the government have spent the money. Now they have shared it, which is a good step.
No, but we used to have this. Don't forget that under former Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, there used to be a publishing of what the share of the federal government was and what states were getting every month in the newspapers, in the dailies. That was something that was done every month, so that we could also hold state governments accountable.
But the kind of the level, the notch that the minister has taken it to now, this kind of details, also sharing details concerning how much is spent or has been spent on wages. It puts all of us in the clear for all of us to defend what we have received. So I can't go tomorrow to the media and say, look, this is what is happening, because I've received some level of clarity for me to interrogate. I also put citizens, and I must say this, citizens are also in a good position now to engage constructively, engage the state government constructively, and also engage the local government constructively, because that is where development should actually start.
It's a good thing that this is coming at the start of campaigns. And don't forget, a few days ago, you know, we had a signing of a peace accord to hold political parties to issues-based campaign, you know, to stay on the issues. And the issue right now is we still know that a lot of Nigerians are facing a cost of living crisis.
Absolutely.
We know that everything, I mean, for a number of people, even when incomes went up, I think only recently we had Labour, you know, making noise and saying, look, this 70,000 naira which we agreed upon is not sufficient.
Lost value.
Exactly, it has lost value, because we keep seeing inflation figures going up. The cost of food has gone up. The cost of not just fuel, electricity has also gone up. And these things are happening. And so at the end of the day, and I think it's a good thing that Mr. Idele kept on saying, I think also the Minister for Information says, we will not pretend that this has not come at a huge cost. The question is, what now needs to be done to bridge, you know, to make these gains also available to ordinary citizens, that they too can begin to feel the impact? We knew that it was going to be painful at first, but at some point we must begin to feel some relief. Some relief must come to ordinary citizens. How would you suggest that that needs to come?
You know, it's a complex situation we find ourselves, and one of the beautiful things is that we are dealing with the structural issues now from where we are coming from. And as we have said many times, it's really not rocket science. Now, the simple definition of inflation is progressive increase in the cost of goods, as it were. Then why are we having increases in the cost of goods and services? It's likely one of the key elements should be the cost of inputs, the cost of doing business itself, the cost of borrowing for manufacturers, creating an hospitable environment for businesses to produce, ramping up or making infrastructures, power, making it available. Because in the last 1 year, manufacturers have spent close to 1 trillion naira on alternative energy, and those alternative energy, they feed back into the cost of doing business. So I think what we can focus on now is deliberately focus on the issues that can drive the cost of doing business down, the cost of inputs. As I said, deal with the issue of interest rate, deal with the regulatory challenges that we currently have, deal with the issue of, I mentioned 130 bills, you know, that are currently in the National Assembly. Each of those elements, each of those 0.1%, 0.2%, they don't disappear. They goes back to the cost of doing business. And once it goes back to the cost of doing business, the average Nigerians will meet them on the shelf. In the goods you buy, in the services you request, you meet those costs, you meet them on the shelf. So we need to look at the whole context of how do we reduce the pressure on the average Nigerians. And lastly for me is the wage goods. You know, we call them wage goods. If you deal with the issue of transportation, you know, all of us, you know, the average Nigerians, the common Nigerians, we all deal with transportation. Deal with the issue of transportation. Deal with the issue of housing, and address the issue of foods. Those are critical basic issues that an average Nigerian, all Nigerians basically, and education also. Let's deal with the public schools, because the amount that an average civil servant spends on private school, it puts pressure not only on the man, it puts pressure on the whole family.
I mean, I don't know what the future means. After listening, I don't know what that. After listening to everything Mr. Oyedele said yesterday, I don't know what's the plan. You know, what's the plan? Because it's not a very good report. It's no one that is very encouraging, because he says the money we incur. When you have debt service to pay, you don't negotiate, you don't delay. He says you pay. Absolutely. Because delay or default are consequences. So we still have to continue paying that money. And then he now says that expenditure on higher wages exceeded the federal government's entire share of the savings from subsidy removal. That's a problem. Then he now says the incremental amount that the federal government spends paying higher wages is more than the entire savings that the federal government earned from subsidy removal. According to him, the reforms were not primarily introduced to increase government revenue, but to tackle what he says is entrenched corruption in Nigeria's fuel subsidy and foreign exchange markets. So it's not a report that says things are good.
Are getting better.
That's what this report is saying.
Two ways to start.
What do they? And you know, Malcolm mentioned the fact that the campaigns are starting, and then well, it's not so very good. But what next? How do we turn this around? Or is this was this report supposed to make us say, let us take our state governments and start holding them accountable? What's the future for us based on this?
Two recommendations from us with this. First, I don't envy the Honourable Minister of Finance. I really don't envy him. But two things we can do from this, and part of our recommendation is this. Now, we seem to be getting it right at the structural level. There have been some gains that he also mentioned. Those gains that we have currently, I think we should ensure that there's no reason for those gains to be eroded. Now, the tax reforms, the implementation have started, and the NRS also have alluded to the fact that they've made quite an improvement within the context of collections. Now, get as many people as possible that are basically out of the tax net before. If you get as many people, those that are not paying tax currently, get them, the big men, as he called them some time ago, that are not paying tax, get them into the tax net. Then your propensity to increase your revenue within the context of those that are paying tax will help you to bridge some of those shortfalls. And then you mentioned a very critical issue, the issue of the wages. And before the end of the year or early next year, we are going back to the trenches in the conversation about the new minimum wage. So the challenges will not disappear. And those that we have voted, I think it's now for them to demonstrate the competence to navigate us. Continuously navigate us out of the trenches. Now we're out of the trenches a bit, because from what he said, where we are coming from, because one of the slides actually showed the baseline, the current position. If there's no reforms, where we'll have found ourselves? We'll have found ourselves in a very big.
Would have been paying higher.
I'm not sure we'll be comfortably sitting here if from his submission, if the reform have not started. So let's tighten up the gains of the reforms, and those gaps that we have identified. Then we just we keep eating those shortfalls so that we can actually come out of this very difficult position.
One of the things I really, one has to admire about how this report was presented is that it's not a bulky book, which is something I would normally see with the Ministry of Finance. Yeah, it's not a bulky book with an executive summary. The presentation was done in slides. It was very practical. What we've saved, where the money is at, and it's something I would encourage all Nigerians to. I mean, as long as you're literate and can read, it will be something worthwhile for you to get your hands on. So, for instance, it talks about the harms that the reforms prevented. Yeah. It talks about how the reforms benefit the average Nigerian. It talks about wage increases and timely payment of salaries and pensions, settlement of pension arrears and gratuities owed to retirees. It also talks about what would have been had it been we did not go down the path of this reform. So very practical, done in a slide fashion that you can easily see where we're spending the largest amount of money on wages and pensions and wage awards seem to have the largest sum of money. So it will be very instructive. It will be very helpful for commissioners of finance to borrow a template from here and also tell us what it is that they have done with the monies that they have received in their states. But you have now also, you're reeling out what now needs to be done for us to be able to move forward. Federal government too is also saying that the looking ahead, in their part of looking ahead, they have said they will stay the course of reform. There will be no reversal. Yep. They will accelerate translation of macro gains into meaningful impact for every household. Let me ask you, how do you think this can actually happen? Because this is where we really want this to happen.
Well, it's quite key. Accelerating the translation of the macro gains to household. And as I said, deal with the issue of the cost of doing business. Once you deal with it, it reflects
on the shelf.
Everything being equal, because we've also seen the issue of these CNG buses. It will shock you that even CNG owners that received grants, subventions from government to import CNG buses, tariff waivers to import CNG buses, they are also charging, from what the report we've gotten, they are also charging the same price that the regular fuels.
Yeah.
So, and that comes back to the part that when the minister said, moving forward, that look, Nigerians should play our part because we can't continue to sabotage the system and expect it to grow. So, for government, beyond giving tariff waivers, I think there also should be some element of monitoring. If we have given you waivers and you have imported without the correct excise, then the prices that you charge should reflect the support that the government has given. If you don't do that, then you have just opened the market to the market forces. And another average individual will look for who exactly to deal with. So those are the patches that we need to deal with. Once we deal with the issue of transportation, with the issue of CNG buses, Nigerians will feel it a bit because it's a cost that goes out of your purse every day.
Yeah.
You deal with the issue of food. Thank God we have some level of sanity now within the context of insecurity. Let's deal with the issue of insecurity and let food also be out of the problems that an average individual is dealing with. And then rightly the issue of public schools, and then the issue of housing. You can't take that out. If you deal with all those, then the conversation will not be much about how much is the minimum wage, because progressively the cost of living will have progressively gone down, and the pressure that an average Nigerian is facing will be less. And as the pressure is going down, you are invariably also solving the issue of insecurity indirectly. So it's a multiplier effect once we get it right. But we'll definitely make our recommendation to the appropriate authorities on how we think these processes can be accelerated quickly.
This certainly provides a basis for engagement.
Absolutely.
We have to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Mr. Adewale Smart Oyemide is the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. Thank you once more for speaking with us.
Thank you for having us.
We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at a number of things that have happened during the week. Laolu Akonde will be in the studio. In just a moment, please stay with us.